When you take a look at this plan here, this is about 3 years of work and about 300 hands have hit this. This is our roadmap to the future. So you have to understand that we have about $125 million budget and we need a plan on how to spend that. This gives us the permission to say yes and to say no to different programs and to where we're headed. When you open up the brochure on the front, inside the front page is our core values. Jolene went through our mission and our core values. And our goal this year is for internal and external understanding of those two areas, our mission and our core values. When you open it up, in the upper right-hand quadrant, you'll see 35 what we call results statements. I call them charge statements. They're basically what the core teams, the action team, and the measurement team have said, this is what we want you to work on over the next 3 to 5 years. This is what we want our district to look like. In the yellow are the priority statements, the 9 priority results that they want us to get going on right away. Some of them we started last year. We won't finish them all this year, but we'll get a good start on them. They'll all be at different phases throughout the year. And then our job will be to prioritize the balance, the other 26 that we have there. And so again, this will be our roadmap to the future for the next 3 to 5 years. And when I came here 7 years ago, we had no formal plan in place, and we worked very hard to get one in place very quickly. And it was very administratively and very board driven, because most of our issues dealt with the growth and in the infrastructure of the district, not out in the buildings. And that plan served us very well. Now we'll move into kind of the hottest topic we got going right now in the district, and that's the election coming up in 3 weeks from tomorrow. We have 2 questions on the ballot. The first one, and if you refer to the colored sheet there, that has all this information on it. It's the single page there. We call it the fact sheet. It's not a script. It's just the facts that our people use to help explain what we've got going here. So the first question is really a renewal of the first of one portion of our levy. We have 3 levies in place totaling I think it's 697 or 698. The largest portion is due next year, and that is the 386. It generates about $5.75 million, roughly about 5% of our budget. And when we talk in numbers like that, 85% of our budget is people. So when we have to cut or add, it's people. We can cut all the glue tape, paper, you name it, and it doesn't amount to a lot. But when 85% of your budget is people, you have to cut people. And when you cut people, you cut programs. When you cut programs, it has a direct effect on kids, and that's why it hurts. So when we look at $1 million, we average about 20 people. From one end of the pay scale to the other, you average it out, and we figure about 20 people per $1 million when you start talking salary, benefits, and what have you. So the first question should be a zero-sum game, depending on the county calculations. They may fluctuate a little bit depending on the number of people and students in the district. For us to get that $5.75 million, again, it may fluctuate a little bit. Second question is the interesting one for us, that the board decided to go after $400 per student, which would get us up closer to the state average. The 697 that we have in place now is about $600 below the metro average and about $250 below the state average of per student in the excess funding area here. So the $400 per student will be broken down in 4 different areas. The first $2.5 million of that will be for free all-day, everyday kindergarten for every eligible student in the district, which is something that a lot of districts provide already. We're a little bit behind the game on that. We have a fee-based option right now, but when you dig deeper into the pluses and minuses of fee-based, you really create 2 different levels of students going into 1st and 2nd grade. And so we want to get everyone on the same playing field with the all-day, everyday piece. This district has, when you look at the equation of supply and demand, we've always had the kids here on the supply side. We just build the boxes and they come. Well, for the first time ever, or I shouldn't say ever, in the last 15 years, we lost 180 kids in the district. We've been tracking now about 40 less students in our kindergarten classes coming in. So the supply is kind of, we're watching that now. We have to stay more, we have to now focus on the demand side. What are people wanting? They're wanting the all-day, everyday kindergartens. They're wanting the world languages in the elementaries, the middle schools. They're wanting the magnet programs. They're wanting the IB programs. they're starting to move. They're starting to leave. They're starting to make these choices with their feet. And so now we have to worry about that portion of the equation. And again, in the past, we run a great but a very basic program here, because we don't have the all days, we don't have the world languages in the elementaries and middle schools, we don't have some of the higher end programming. But now we have to pay attention to that, and that's what this funding will help us with. That's the first portion, the all day, every day piece. The second piece, $800,000 of that money will go to curriculum and technology, in which curriculum and technology are one and the same today. The one really feeds off the other, and a typical curriculum cycle in a state averages about 5 to 6 years where they turn over new equipment and books and what have you. We're at about 10 to 11 years. With this infusion of money, it should go down to about 6 or 7 years, and that's getting current information into our teachers' hands and our kids' hands. The next portion of that is operating capital balance. And what is operating capital? Well, 85% of our budget is people. It's putting people in front, it's putting teachers in front of kids. Our class sizes are okay right now. I wouldn't say that they're the highest in the metro, and I wouldn't say they're the lowest. But one thing that differs us from the private sector is we're not making widgets here. We're educating kids, and that's a whole different ball game. And that operating capital is putting quality people in front of those kids, because we can't not afford to educate every kid to their highest level. It's just imperative. As we look at the highest tax-paying portion of our culture right now, our demographic is 55 to 62. We're moving through the system. And pretty soon we're going to be on the receiving end of the system. And these kids coming up, there's fewer of them than there is of us. So, do the simple math. Those kids have to be very productive. And that's why we have to make this investment in this second question to help us keep up with our expenses. Again, and also, we have about a $5 million hole in our budget hanging out here in 2 years. And every district in the state has that, and every district in the country has somewhere around that size number, because the federal stimulus money that we received a couple years ago is washed through the system. So now we got to figure out how we're going to plug that hole. And this is one way that we can do that, by going to the voters. But also, we decided too that the voters can't bail us out of this whole problem. We have to take some ownership too. If we pass both these questions, we will still have roughly around a $2 million hole out there. But we believe through fund balance and efficiencies, we can take care of that. So we want to meet this piece, in the middle. So those are our two questions. How are our kids doing? Again, this is just some general information for you. Our students are performing very well on our MCAs. In all the different areas, math, reading, and state, we're outscoring the state. There was math, reading. I'm going to go through these very quick. This was a little graph here of our enrollment trends. This district has grown significantly. When you get down here to 97, 98. And you see where we were about 8,500 kids. You took a little time off here in 03. One year you put 700 kids in seats. Now that'd be nice if they all came in one school, but they come across the district in different packages, and 700 is unbelievable. We're right here now. Again, I mentioned we lost about 180 kids this last year, so that took a bite out of our budget, slowed down. Now these are, what do we call, this is our, what do we call them? Just our projections, the old projection now, and we just had a demographic study, and we haven't broken that out yet and broken it down to see what this trend line will be. But you can see the trend line that this district was on for quite a while. Again, I mentioned, when we started looking at our kindergarten classes over the years, for the first time ever, we're down under, I shouldn't say ever, first time in years, we're down under 900. Which that's that supply and demand piece I was talking about there, that we're losing our kindergartners to neighboring districts for different programming. Revenue from the state, you can you see where we're at right here. And a lot of this is because we're considered a rich white district. We have very low minority population. The compensatory dollars are low and are free and reduced. Then you look at the state average, you look at the metro average. The dollars that they're getting, we're really, on the low end here. When we look at the operating levy piece, I call this the rich get richer legislation here. We're down here at 698. Now these are AMSD school districts, about the top 30 some in the metro area. And you can see the top districts in the state, have over $1,900. If I had that levy in place, I'd have $25 million a year more to run this place. And we could do a lot of things with $25 million. Now, that's not to say that our people aren't paying their fair share of taxes. They are. The problem is, as I mentioned before, we're a high debt district. We have a mortgage of about $180 million in the district. When I came here 7 years ago, our house payment was roughly around $8 million a year. Right now it's what, Randy, $22 million a year. This thing was financed and backloaded with the understanding that this district was going to grow and it was going to spread out. Well, what happened 5 years ago? Probably the worst thing that could have happened. Everything tanked, no growth, what have you. So now our taxing capacity is going into paying off the mortgage rather than going into our classrooms. And when you look at the Gold Coast over on the other side, on the west side of the cities, they've paid off their buildings. That money's going into all the programming, the IB programs, the languages, the all-day, everydays, which is giving our kids a significant disadvantage. And here's where the zip code of where a kid lives is going to dictate the quality of education. And, that can't be. This is public education. And where this really comes through is in our National Merit Scholars, the top half of 1% in the country, the elite kids. Our district should have 1 or 4 every year with the number of kids we have. We have 1 maybe every other year. And the Edinas, the Minnetonkas, the Wayzatas are cranking out 15 to 20. They're smaller districts, but why are they doing it? They don't have better teachers. They don't have smarter kids. They've got the programming to get these kids to that level. And again, it's what we're calling the opportunity gap. And it's pretty wide out here. Fiscal responsibility, we've done almost everything we could possibly do in the last 7 years to wring out, I guess, what we call excess dollars into outside contracts, vendors that come into our system and what have you. Administrative costs, we're well under the state average. Transportation, we've wriggled out about $1 million a year out of that contract, and we still provide very good service. And we don't own our own buses. We contract for that with Vision. We've always offered early retirement incentives, which usually gives us $500,000 a year. Health care, we have for the first time in a long time a 4% decrease that was negotiated this last year, and a lot of that's been through the efforts of our human resources area, educating people on how to use plans. So the impact of the 2 questions, first one should be a zero-sum game. Second one is going to raise taxes. And if you look on your sheet there's a tax calculator on our website you can go to. Punch in your numbers. It'll tell you what your bite is. Our proposal is, though, I think I can say safely with it, we plan on mitigating about 20-30% of that tax bite with other controlling levies, other control of levies that we have. Good example is we refunded, was it $40 million worth of bonds? $34 million worth of bonds, and hopefully we'll see a $4 million savings over 9 years to the taxpayers. That's a big chunk. But we have control over a few things we can do, so hopefully we'll take a third of that tax bite, off the taxpayers' plates. Again, there's the tax, just a little sample of the calculation there. With passage, again, things I talked about, all day, everyday kindergarten, technology, curriculum. And I think the interesting piece here is the competitive piece here. We're going to be competitive with our neighbors. And, the interesting part about that is competitiveness. It's not just with St. Michael. It's not just with St. Cloud, St. Paul, Minneapolis. I mean, these kids got to be competitive with California, Florida, and internationally for jobs, for spots in colleges, and what have you. I'll go through this fairly quickly here. Again, without passage, roughly we're looking at about $12 million deficit over the next couple of years. And $12 million means about 240 people would lose jobs in this district, which would be devastating to the programming and what we've got going so far. When you look at all of our test scores and what have you, for the last 6-7 years, we've been progressively tracking upward. And compliments go to Jan and her teaching and learning team. I've never seen a district that uses data. Districts are great at collecting data, but this one uses data. And the proof is in the pudding there with our test scores. If we get 2 no votes, you can kind of see the graph here. When you look at this, you first look at this graph here. That red line is our projected expenditures, and the revenue down there, you can see how that gap widens. The first time somebody saw this, they said, well, you got a spending problem. Well,